Homerpalooza versus the Homer They Fall. 2 episodes about Homer getting hit by stuff. That's it. That's what the 2 episodes have in common. It's a battle between Homer's stomach and Homer's face. Both are most certainly going to take a beating, but the real question is, which is the better episode? So it's probably fair to say that thematically, these 2 episodes don't have a lot in common. One is a story about Homer trying to be cool for his kids, the other is a Homer and Moe journey in the world of boxing. But it's interesting. It's interesting how late in Season 7, and then early in Season 8, we get these 2 stories highlighting something about Homer's body. How there is something seemingly indestructible about him, something Homer can take advantage of. Both episodes hinge on Homer potentially being killed in the process. The dramatic tension is somewhat similar between these 2. It's the journey getting there that is quite different. As always, we'll start with the earlier episode. So everyone put on your flannel shirts and dour expressions, because this is the case for Homerpalooza. Homerpalooza is one of the coolest time capsule episodes in the history of The Simpsons. It is so deeply entrenched in what the culture was in 1996. You were either there and you can totally get nostalgic about this scene, or you can be too old or too young and totally be puzzled by all of this. Hey, finally something for millennials and baby boomers to agree on. Thanks, Gen X. The first reason why Homerpalooza is superior should be obvious. It has way better social commentary than the other episode. It's an episode about the world, how people like Homer suddenly find pop culture weird and scary. I think a lot of people can relate to Homer's taste not lining up with others, how they judge him for his old references and stuff. There's a lot of nice character stuff here. The kids getting fed up with him, Homer's revisionist history about how cool he was, the way the musicians relate to him. But the generational stuff is really what's memorable. Jokes about how bleak the music was, the commercialization of it, the depressing swaying of the audience. I love how swiftly all the people turn on Homer, yelling hate crime at him and stuff. The whole thing is this cool little snapshot of what music was like during this time period. Even if you're like me and don't really get Sonic Youth, seriously, what is that end credit music? It's still cool that we got this kind of new thing from the show. The second reason why Homerpalooza is better is because it has just plain sillier jokes. Having all these celebrities lets the writers just do whatever joke they want. Although honestly, Cypress Hill gets all the best ones. The London Symphony Orchestra joke is a classic. Smashing Pumpkins gets great lines too, really like the delivery of that Audio-Visual Club joke. Homer's pathetic attempt to fit in is very memorable, love that button that he throws on top. Then we get the physical humor of just Homer getting knocked down over and over again. I love how this one he literally never gets up, the camera just stays on his lifeless body for like 5 seconds. You could argue that the jokes are all over the place, and to be frank, they probably are, but that's what's fun about it, and that's why they stand out. It's a ridiculous situation, let's have ridiculous jokes. That's what the show is good at. And finally, Homerpalooza is the better episode because Homer is just way better in it. It's one of those nice examples of Homer actually trying at something, trying to make a good impression for his kids. He's very active, we get a good sense of who he is and what he wants. The other episode, he barely has anything to do. He just kinda takes a beating, doesn't seem to have any agency or anything. Homer won't take a dive on his own for some reason. This one presents Homer trying to connect with his kids, trying to impress them, and actually faces a dilemma in Act 3. There's tension, we get the conflict that he's facing. The other episode would have had Billy Corgan push Homer out of the way or something. Overall, there's a nice balance of giving Homer a spotlight episode from a characterization standpoint, but throwing a lot of fun guest stars and side stuff as well. We don't need a ton of Bart and Lisa because that would just bloat the episode. It has a very strong sense of where the fun is and where the emotional stakes are, and keeps things in a nice tight little package. And no, I'm not being sarcastic. At least I think I'm not. Curse you, Gen X. So that closes the book on Homerpalooza. Now let's lace up those boxing gloves and prepare for our inevitable concussion. This is the case for The Homer They Fall. Okay, so that last episode was fine and all, but let's just be honest here. It's a pretty gimmicky episode. Now, the Homer They Fall, it doesn't have to bring in a bunch of celebrities to make an interesting episode. Sure, we're still going to have celebrities, why not? But we're not going to spend a bunch of time to show them off or awkwardly insert them into scenes. We're going to focus on the characters we love, the ones we watch the show for. The Homer They Fall is the superior episode because it simply has better characters. The other episode is just a Homer romp. That's it. This one is cool in how it brings in Moe and Marge into the situation and looks at these relationships. You could argue this is actually a Moe episode, since he ends up getting most of the inner conflict. We get a sense of how much Homer trusts Moe as a manager. We get the sense of Moe's regrets over his past failures. Like, it'll actually have a scene where Marge confronts Moe and begs him to look out for her husband. The other episode just has her watching passively or complaining about how dumb this freak show thing is. Now, Homer himself may not actually have as much agency in this one, but that's what's so compelling about it. He's essentially a pawn in this scheme. It's really a vehicle for showing how the people around him care about him and will eventually look out for him. To complement this, they serve up a lot of nice Drederick Tatum and Lucius Sweet character moments. Tatum is so great with his whole parole hearing about making orphans of Homer's children, and Paul Winfield's vocal delivery with his polysyllabic wordplay is just a joy to listen to. Secondly, the Homer They Fall is better because it has a way more coherent plot. It's a little more down to earth, the boxing stuff starts out very humble with hobos and stuff. Sure, Homer does end up boxing the heavyweight champion of the world, but they go through the motions of demonstrating his physical abnormality and are upfront about how ridiculous Lucius Sweet's demands are. It's not an episode about Homer going out there and putting himself in a ridiculous situation, it just kinda comes to him. Since they don't have to introduce a lot of celebrities, we can more easily build the tension of this situation. When Homer does finally get into the ring with Drederick Tatum, it is legitimately scary. Like, Homer gets the crap beaten out of him. They show him just getting hit over and over and over again. It's brutal. The show doesn't exactly pull any punches in portraying this. There's a real rising action to the plot that the other episode just doesn't have. Once Moe swoops in there and saves Homer in the end, the moment feels totally earned. Everything flows really nicely. As a whole, there's just a more timeless quality to the Homer They Fall. I mean, yeah, this is still a very topical story about boxing, and that is most definitely a Mike Tyson and Don King parody, but the Homer They Fall is more of a character piece. It's not focused on taking a perfect snapshot of the world of boxing at that time. What I really care about is Homer and Marge and Moe. I don't really care about how well a guest star delivers a joke. That stuff is just gravy. Watching this episode in 2018 isn't weird or anything, it feels just as fresh as it was in 1996. It's an episode that has a strong sense of what The Simpsons is and what is so great about it. It also has a really nice Raging Bull parody. I mean, what is more timeless than a Raging Bull parody? It's a classic. And with that, the case for the Homer They Fall is complete. Now we've kind of put Homer through a lot already, so maybe we shouldn't draw this out. Let's go to the verdict. This contest has ended up a little weird, because despite all of the Homer abuse that we've seen so far, the two episodes are a little apples and oranges. What Homerpalooza is good at is so dramatically different than the Homer They Fall. Their sensibilities are almost polar opposites. I find Homerpalooza to be the funnier episode of the two, but it is definitely way more inconsistent. Most of my biggest laughs are from this one, but also the biggest groaners. We have junk like the Rover Hendricks thing, Otto's talking shoes, basically everything about Peter Frampton I find kinda lame. It hits kind of a lull in the third act, where they're just biding their time until Homer makes his decision. It's cool that they got Sonic Youth to do the end credits, but they really don't give them anything to do. This is clearly padding. The plot is just a lot of standing around and saying witty music things. It's fine, I guess. I just feel like this kind of plot is the sort of thing we criticize them for in the later seasons. I mean, Homer does pretty much the same thing in Kill the Alligator and Run. That's probably not an episode you want a comparison to. The Homer They Fall is kind of the opposite, where I really enjoy how tightly written the character stuff is. The interactions is really where this one shines, but the jokes are pretty below average for this period of the show. They're a little too sober and serious for their own good. Boxing is a serious situation full of serious people. They struggle a little in making the jokes really bright and fun. Thank goodness for the fan thing at the end. The episode desperately needed an injection of wackiness somewhere. Although I have always loved that surgical 2x4 joke. But it does kind of demonstrate how this is a clever episode, not really a fun one. To be honest, neither of these strike me as huge standouts from seasons 7 and 8. They're both good, both definitely memorable. I just wouldn't put them in my upper tier of Oakley and Weinstein episodes. But that ends up making for a more fair comparison, I suppose. So, if I had to pick only one of these episodes, I think I would go with Homerpalooza. This one ultimately came down to the jokes for me. Despite some of the groaners, there are just way too many good ones in this episode. I laugh almost every single time they show those dour teenagers swaying in the crowd. It's just perfect. I make fun of its reliance on guest stars, but they really do get some good material to play with. Homerpalooza definitely had the potential to be the way worse episode of the two, hence the alligator reference, but it's saved by its execution. They ultimately did a nice job at keeping the focus on the theme of Homer and his pursuit of coolness. They made it less of a vanity project for its guest stars. I think I probably would have voted for the Homer They Fall if the jokes were just more memorable. I really do like the Marge and Moe dynamic with Homer in this one. It's just a little dull sometimes to sit through. It needs a few more tricks to keep the story engaging. It's a little one note. Maybe it could have used more sequences like this one, I don't know. So that's where I landed on this one. Homer getting hit in the stomach is the better episode. I mean, come on. Homer's stomach is just funnier. Just look at that thing. Do you think I made the right call, or should we go for round 2? Maybe the Homer They Fall should win by technical knockout. Let me know in the comments. But for now, this case is closed.